How should you measure success in your life? Often in our world today, we get so much pressures from social media, from our family, to measure success in a certain way. And I got caught in that trap. I was so fed up with wanting money and only money and not being purpose driven. But once I was able to make that change, and that was my personal choice, and you're not saying you should do what I have done, but it's been very helpful with my mission, my alignment, and make sure I'm enjoying the work that I'm doing and measuring my success in a way I want to. With that being said, I plan to show you in this video how you can go about planning your own success and how you can measure your own success. I'm first gonna give you a mindset shift that I think is really helpful. Then I'm gonna show you and help you visualize, and this is very key. And then after that, we're gonna track some things and how to go about that. With that being said, I promise you, by the end of this video, you will understand how you should measure your success in life. So the first step in this process is going to be to give you a mindset shift. I think often nowadays people value the followers. They value the money. They value the status of their position. But those are all outcomes. And so what I've done in my life and what's worked really well for me is to switch from an outcome-based focus to a process-based or a work-based focus. So instead of focusing on how much money I'm making or whatever that may be or what my status is as a coach, whatever, I'm focused on how many hours I'm working and how much input I'm putting in there. How many messages am I sending? How much content am I creating? How many hours am I working to make a better product? And those are the things, and that's what I value of success in my life. Now don't get me wrong, I still care about the money. I still care about the power. It's just I don't put as much emphasis as I did in the past. I really get caught up with perfectionism in the past, and maybe you find that in your own life. And making this shift can be really helpful. And so my mantra to make that shift from outcome to process has been the work is the goal. And I owe that phrase to Alex Ramosi. He taught me that. And I think that's really valuable, that the work is the goal. That really helped me focus on process. That's the one first mindset shift I want you to have. On top of that, I don't want you to make happiness your success metric in life, because I think that's kind of a trap. And what I mean by this is that by saying happiness is your goal of success in life, is to say that all other emotions are wrong, which they are not. I think you're very successful if you're feeling mad, if you're feeling sad, if you're feeling stressed. Those are all very healthy, good emotions to feel, at least in my opinion. And so I don't think you should make happiness the goal, but actually to make the most out of your life the goal. Because you're not gonna be happy to get up at 6 a.m. and go lift. But later in that day, you'll feel like you made the most out of your life in your day by doing that action, if that makes sense. So instead of focusing on happiness and your short-term satisfaction, think of making the most out of your life and also valuing the process over the outcome. So that's one piece of a mindset shift. Another piece of your mindset shift that I want to help you overcome is to identify what you want. Not what I want, not what Chris wants, but what you want. Not your parents, not your friends, not influencers online, but truly to identify what do you want out of your life. And we're gonna go through this in the second step on how to figure out what you want, but I want you to carry that with you throughout this video and really for the rest of your days, that focus on what you want out of your life, because that's what matters. That's what's making the most out of your life. Now, on top of that, you also wanna ask yourself, what do you want your life balance to look like? And what I mean by this is that there is nothing quote unquote unhealthy, unless it's like biologically unhealthy, like drinking yourself to death or stuff like that. I don't think there's necessarily anything unhealthy. Now, I mean, obviously don't affect others by doing unhealthy things, but I'm talking more in terms of like, oh, people are like, you shouldn't exercise that much or you shouldn't work that much. Like that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the things that harm others or harm yourself. I'm talking about there's nothing like unhealthy in terms of like working hours or how you want your life balance to work. So when I say unhealthy, only think of it in a work-life balance context, not anything else. So what I mean is like, if you want to work 16 hours a day and you enjoy that, that might be making the most out of your life to you. And I think you should go for it. And also on the same flip side, if working 2 hours a day is what you want to do and you want to use the other 14 to spend with family or friends or exploring nature, then do that. And there's nothing unhealthy. Each spectrum is whatever you want it to be. So you just have to find that balance. You want to think about, what do I want my life to look like if I didn't have all the other influences of what's quote unquote unhealthy or healthy. So the second step is going to be to visualize what amazing looks like to you. And you can do this in 2 ways. You could do it with the balance wheel, and that's one of my favorite ways to do it. So you can take that in the description below at the end of the video, because what the balance wheel will do, it'll lay out your life and the pie, and you might get 2 out of 10, you might get 10 out of 10 in some areas. But the cool thing about it is that if you get a 2 out of 10 in an area, you can ask yourself, what would amazing look like in that area? And then you could start working towards that success to strive for that 10 out of 10. That's one of my favorite ways. Another one of my favorite ways is to ask yourself these 4 situations, because when you go through these 4 situations, you'll start to decipher what does success look like to you, because they're different. So what these 4 situations are is, number 1, if I were to give you $100 million, what would you go buy with it? What would you do? Where would you travel? Whatever, X, Y, or Z. If I told you that, hey, I'm gonna pay you $100,000 for the rest of your life, you just have to be doing something that you enjoy. That's the second situation. What are some of the things you do? Number 3 is that if you had a 3-year expiration date, doctor told you, hey, you're gonna die in 3 years to this date, what would you do with your time remaining? And number 4 is that if you were at your 100th birthday, what are some of the legacy things you wanna be hearing? What are some of the conversations that would be being had celebrating you? By going through these 4 situations, each of them are kind of uniquely different in their own way. And you can start to look at like, oh, okay, you know what? I really care about legacy and I really care about making an impact. So with that, I'm gonna strive to measure my success based upon the impact that I make and those inputs related to that. If that kind of makes sense. So you go through those 4 situations, and that can be helpful in lending a lens to how you wanna look at success in your life. Now, on top of the 4 situations of the balance wheel, you also want to look at what impact or purpose do you want to have in your life. Think about the impact you want to have on the relationships of those around you. Think about the impact you want to have in your work. Think about the impact or purpose you want to have in your community. Thinking about those things can also offer a lens into what success looks like in your life. You're like, you know what? Thinking about my community, I really want to give back because I struggled with X, Y, or Z, and I really want to give back to my community in that way. That could be a really good way to look at how I'm measuring your success in your life. Another great way to look at visualizing and measuring success is to look at how you're spending your time. Time is limited, and how you spend it can be a pretty good indication of how you feel about your success in life. And you have to measure how you spend your time in your own way, as I talked about earlier with the unhealthy versus healthy time spectrum. But looking at that time is limited, how should I spend it, is a good way to how you could measure success in your life. So instead of doom scrolling for 4 hours, maybe you spend 2 hours in nature and then 2 hours doom scrolling. If that's what you want to do, that's how you measure success. You just have to figure that out for yourself. So the third and final step is to assess your growth and progress, or really just track the input and the process that you've created. So maybe you've gone through and you realize you really care about legacy pieces and you really care about serving your community. So your inputs could be hours working with the community and certain activities within the community that you're doing. That could be a good way to track it. And so I really like to track the things that I do. So I use 2 really, I think, helpful tracking things that I do. So as I told you earlier, that I track my hours worked and the inputs I do with the things related to those hours. So I like to use sticky notes because that's a good input of the things that I'm doing. And I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do in the day, and these are the inputs that I'm going to do that make me a better product or contribute to my long-term goal. And on top of that, I also have an hour leaderboard with myself and only myself. I don't look at how many hours other people are working. I just look at how many hours I've worked. And all I do is it motivates me to try to just get to the highest score on my leaderboard. And so what I do is I'll set a quarterly objective at the beginning of the quarter, how many hours I generally want to work in a week. But then I'll have these leaderboards. I'll have a top 5 leaderboard of how many hours I worked. And I just try to get to that, that first place spot every week. And if I go to the first place, I'll at least get 4th or 5th place. And so that's what I do. I try to do every week. And travel comes up and stuff like that. But tracking that metric has helped me work a lot more. Because right now I'm working, anywhere from 45 to 50 hours. And in the past, I used to think I was doing a lot by spending 10 minutes a day working on business stuff. And it took a big mindset shift for me to get over that, but I just tell you that it's just been like a steady growth, and then it's kind of been exponential, and as I've upgraded my mindset on how many hours and how many inputs I'm doing, and by tracking it, is why I think I've been able to do that, if that makes sense. So I think tracking these things is really key because our lives are so busy, we're so interconnected, and it's hard to track your inputs and your process that you're doing, and it can make it almost feel as good as an outcome. So like for me, tracking these things and seeing how accomplished I am makes it almost as enjoyable as making a lot of money, if that makes sense. And that's how I think about it. So that leaderboard and the sticky note is really helpful for me. Now, on top of that, what I would encourage you to do as you assess your growth and your progress, you're gonna fail sometimes. There's sometimes where I go into a week, I'm like, yes, I'm gonna kill it. I'm gonna get that first spot on the leaderboard, and I don't get anywhere near the leaderboard, and I don't work near as much as I wanted to. But it's important for me to learn from those failures, just as it is for you as well. On top of learning from those failures, the biggest metric, or one of the biggest metrics that you can measure success, is not quitting. So I have the fundamental belief that you only lose if you quit. Again, I got that from Alex Hormozy, and I hold it near and dear to my heart, is that if I just get up and keep going every day, if I just keep working and keep putting in the inputs, no matter how bleak it looks, if I never quit, I will win, and I only lose if I quit. So learn from your failures and do not quit. On top of learning from your failures, I'd also encourage you to track your milestones, whatever milestones, set some out beforehand. For me, it's like hours. So I do like quarterly objectives, and then I set those hours, and those are like milestones for me. Same thing with inputs. Like if I hit a certain amount of content created, hit a certain amount of messages sent, hit a certain amount of clients that I've taken through my program and helped change their lives. All those things are milestones for me, and I'd encourage you to track those as well. So that's how you should measure success in your life. Again, this is just kind of my paradigm and my mindset. I hopefully was helpful with helping you create your own paradigm and your own mindset throughout this. So if I was, go ahead and throw a comment in the description so I know to make more of these videos. And on top of that, if you'll like and subscribe, it helps the channel a lot.